Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is Professor Plunkett here. We want to go over Chapter 3 in our Introduction to Criminal Justice course based upon Sage Publications book by Ken Peek and Tamara Medensen, 2018. So this week, we're going to be covering Chapters 3 and 4. This particular lecture will only address Chapter 3. We're looking at theories of crime and measuring victimization. So we'll be looking at really high-level overview of some of the crime theories. And you're more than welcome. I have my criminology lectures posted on my YouTube channel, which I'll tell you about in class. And some of you may see this on that YouTube channel, so they're right there available for you if you want more details on these theories that we're going to talk about today. We're going to high-level theory overview of criminology, and then we're going to look at the systems that are in place, mostly in the United States, to measure crime and crime victimization. So the first group of theories that's usually talked about in any criminology course, which you will most likely have either concurrent with this class or after this class. In some cases, you might be scheduled due to scheduling before this class, so you might already be aware of these things. The first one is the classical school. And basically the classical school, really down and dirty basic, is people have free will. People choose to do things. People choose their criminal behavior. They choose their lawful behavior. These theorists also believe that crime could be controlled by sanctions that would be proportionate or equal to the offense. So that if somebody committed a crime, there's some type of consequence or sanction in place that is going to control them or maybe deter. One of the things we talk about is deterrence, that some people might see, well, if I am going to go to prison for committing a robbery, I don't want to commit that robbery. So that's like the first major school, and our criminal justice system pretty much is based upon classical theories where we have laws in place, we have consequences in place that then suggest that people might be deterred by that consequence. At the same time, other theorists look at it in a different way. There's also punishment, or if you've heard the theory of the punishment fits the crime. That's the sanction should be proportionate to the offense. They also talk about the concepts of the criminal justice system should be certain, swift, and severe. Certain means you're going to get something. Swift means it's going to happen fairly quickly. And severe is that proportional thing. It should be that the punishment fits the crime. It's severe enough that it's going to deter somebody. So the major theorists in that area were Cesare Beccaria and Jeremy Bentham. And there are 5 main principles that you can read about in your textbook with regard to these theories. Positivist theory kind of followed classical theory. Positivists believe that you can figure out everything by science, and it was an individual issue, and people were possibly controlled by things that they were born with. They didn't necessarily have the ability to control. In positive theories, we saw a lot of biological things in the early years. It might have been measuring the body, looking at the shape of the skull, the variety of different things, scientific things. Following much later in the 1970s, the classical theorists were back in the 1800s. Neoclassical criminology is basically bringing back the idea of classical theorists suggesting that people have choice. Now they're going to call it rational choice. But in some cases we'll say, well, the person might be exempted or excused from conviction if some circumstances prevented their ability to make the right choice. We'll look at that more deeply. So positive, as I mentioned, was following the classical theorists in the late 1800s and so on, arguing science can be used to discover true causes of crime, which include factors outside of the offender's control. And there's still things going on in that realm of positivism. Some early positivists were August Comte and Cesare Lombroso. Biological trait and developmental theories suggested that there were biological things going on, there were traits that people were born with that would explain criminal behavior, and that criminal behavior was the result of these physical or psychological differences between offenders and non-offenders. So there was some talk about chromosomes, and there was actually a theory that suggested that some males had an extra Y chromosome, although that was widely disputed, and there were studies after the original theory came out that suggested that it really wasn't true, but it was believed at one time to cause agitation, aggression, and greater criminal tendencies. Body type theories suggested that certain types of body types led to patterns of criminal behavior. One might have been, somebody who's like really an athletic type of person, strong, would be more likely to commit violent crime. Of course, what we know is there's plenty of people out there that have strong body types that are not out committing crime, whether it be football players, baseball players, basketball players, hockey players. Certainly in many cases more aggressive, and some of them actually do commit crimes and violent crimes, but that's not a significant number of them. They also did what we call adoption studies, where they would look to see whether the adopted children, if they committed criminal acts, did their biological parents commit the same type of acts? Did their adoptive parents commit these acts? And the idea there was to try to see whether there was a biological component. So if you take someone as an infant and place them in an adoptive home, and their parent, biological parent, commits certain types of crimes, and you see the child committing the same types of crimes later in life, but the adoptive parents are like straight and narrow folks, you might suggest that, well, maybe there's a biological component. At the same time, if the adoptive parents are also, have some criminal behavior, and the child has that criminal behavior and the biological parents don't, maybe you say they learned that behavior. And there's many theories we're going to talk about, learning types of theories where people learn from others, modeling theories where people model after other people. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that some of that is true. Social disorganization theory is theory that suggests that the character of a neighborhood, breakdown of social controls, and if you think about some of more rundown neighborhoods where there's maybe a lot of graffiti, vacant lots with a lot of weeds growing, trash in the streets, unkempt houses, you may also see crime there. So there were some theories that suggest if there is this type of neighborhood, it causes crime. Of course, the question could be did the crime lead to the disorganization in the neighborhood, or did disorganization in the neighborhood lead to the crime? Strain theory, it suggested that people commit crime because of various strains that occur in their lives, and they're trying to relieve that strain, and they're looking at maybe, well, I can't get the job. There's no way I'm going to make it through college, and they decide to take a criminal or illegitimate means to success rather than the legitimate means to success. Social process theories, I mentioned that there was, people learn about criminal behavior. So learning theory suggests people learn from associating with other people, social interactions and experiences. Control theory is basically, criminal behavior is our natural desire to seek pleasure when there's not enough control to keep us from going over the line. Labeling theory is an interesting theory. It suggests that people commit crimes because they're labeled as deviant or criminal, which, when those of you that are interested in the juvenile system, note that the juvenile system uses entirely different names for things throughout the system. There's a focus more on rehabilitation and not labeling, because of the suggestion that, if you label a child as a criminal, that maybe they're going to take on the label. Now, the interesting thing about labeling theory is labeling theorists can't explain why someone might commit a crime in the first place to get the label, but they suggest that people might continue having gotten that label. Social conflict suggests that the crime is a result of conflicts between groups within society, conflicting interests within those groups or between those groups. people with power exploit those without power, and therefore leading to crime. Feminist theories suggest that certain crimes are caused by gender inequality, causes some females to commit crime. Justice system responses to females have an effect as well. Some laws that might impact that Equal Employment Opportunity Act, Pregnancy Discrimination Act, Family Medical Leave Act, to provide more opportunities for females and to address, issues within the lives of females that may be different from what happens in the lives of men, which may have led to discrimination. And we still potentially hear stories today about, females in the workplace being discriminated against because either, they are pregnant, they're raising children, and all these things obviously are unfair because, what's the difference there? The female's actually taking on more responsibility by trying to accomplish multiple tasks. Environmental theories suggest that the environment, the area in which you reside, the situations that you put yourself in have an effect on crime. So routine activities theory suggests that, people who are involved in certain types of activities and doing certain things place themselves, maybe not on purpose, but just because, place themselves in situations where they may be more likely to be victimized and some people more likely to commit crime. So routine activities theory suggests that, let's say you work in a job, like there was a young woman, I believe it's in Germantown section of Philadelphia several years ago, coming home late from work. She got off a bus and she had to walk a couple blocks to get home late at night after dark, and she was kidnapped off the street. She was actually successfully recovered, safe and alive and unharmed. But that would be an example of routine activities theory, is that she's coming home that particular hour late every night by herself and exposing herself to the potential of being attacked. I believe she actually normally had a ride pick her up, but the ride couldn't show up, and therefore she had to walk from the bus stop to her house. Situational crime prevention is the idea of reducing the opportunities that people have to commit crimes, like putting good locks on your doors. The really over the top would be in some neighborhoods where people put bars on the windows. But the idea is that crimes will occur if there's opportunities, if it's easier to commit things. Like if you park your car on the street and leave your phone or your laptop on the front seat, somebody's going to see it, they're going to smash the window, they're going to take it. If you don't bother to lock your doors, even if you got nothing in it, my experience in the suburbs, people would walk down the street and just check the door handles, and every time they found a car with the door open, they would go in and toss it, see what they could find. So situational crime prevention is doing those things that's going to create obstacles to make it harder for people to commit crimes. So moving on from theory, and that was a really, really quick high-level overview. Your book goes into more detail, but I could spend like all day talking about this stuff. And like I said, I also have videos from the Criminology course that are posted on my YouTube channel. So anyway, measuring crime and victimization. It's really important to know, where does crime come from? Where is crime occurring? Who is being victimized? And with the technology that's available and different things, crime mapping, different ways of collecting data, there's more and more information that's becoming available and making it easier and easier to look at things. So theories can help us understand why crimes occur. Crime rates can help us understand how prevalent crime and offenders are. So we might know, like Philadelphia Police does crime mapping, and they collect the data immediately after the crime occurs, and they can actually construct models day to day, sometimes hour by hour, to see, where's the crime occurring? And then maybe the next day, did it move, up the block, 3 blocks over? They can actually see patterns of crime on a daily basis. So the data is getting better and better to tell us in shorter time frames. Criminology and crime measurement, the theories and understanding where crime occurs and how it occurs often work together. And sometimes criminological theorists will use the crime data to help them to figure out why crime occurs. So there's a back and forth between the two. So we want to know why, and we want to know how much. Of course, we don't absolutely positively know why. There are a lot of theories out there, and sometimes it's a combination of things. When we study criminology, we'll be looking at the fact that criminology is an interdisciplinary field where you have information coming from a lot of different directions. There's a lot of different theories, and some of them have a lot of credence, and some, it's like some of the older biological theories that you'll look at are just total bunk. And even today, people come up with theories that are totally off base. So that's why you have to study things multiple times to check. So one of the ways we measure crime in the United States is the Uniform Crime Report, started in 1999 or 1929. It's monitored by the FBI. It was supposed to give us an idea of what's going on. So every municipality in the country is asked to report the crime that's going on. Unfortunately, it's a voluntary system, so we don't get full participation. And of course, another problem with it is it only counts those crimes that have been reported. So in criminology, we talk about the idea of the dark figure of crime. The dark figure of crime are those crimes that are not reported, so we don't know that they exist. A crime rate, somebody says, well, what's the crime rate? Crime rate is the number of reported crimes divided by the population of the jurisdiction and multiplied by 100,000 persons. So the idea there is you can actually compare different communities of different sizes to see which one actually has a higher level of crime. For example, we here are in the Philadelphia area. Many of our students are in the Philadelphia area, usually in the city of Philadelphia, but directly across the river is the city of Camden. Philadelphia has 1.5 million people. Camden has somewhere under 100,000. I don't know off the top of my head, but those of you taking this course, in your Sage Vantage textbook online, there is a whole list that you can see that information, and you can also look at the UCR. But knowing what the crime rate is, you can have a better way to compare which city might be more safe or more dangerous. All right, Uniform Crime Report is broken out into a bunch of different types of offenses. So you have Part 1, which are 8 serious felonies that are listed here: murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, theft, which is larceny and theft is stealing somebody's property. So if I walk out of this room here and I leave my phone on the desk and somebody comes in and takes it, that's a larceny theft. Motor vehicle theft and arson. Those are the 8 serious felonies that are listed. And something that most people don't understand a distinction, criminal justice students should, that a robbery is when somebody actually forcibly or with the threat of force takes something from you. So you have to be present to get robbed. A burglary is when someone goes into a property with the purpose of committing some other serious crime. So if someone goes into your house while you're at work and they break in, or maybe you left the door open, didn't do your situational crime prevention, and they walk in and they steal your stuff, you don't say you got robbed because you weren't there. You were burglarized. So as a criminal justice student, you're going to use the proper terminology. As a criminal justice professional, which some of you obviously are already working in the field, you probably understand this. These are defined in the state of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, wherever you happen to be, by statutes at the state level, and some at the federal level. But most of these criminal acts are defined by laws at the state level, and we discussed that in the legal lecture last week. All right, Part 2 offenses are a whole list of like 20 offenses where only arrest data. So they might be drug possession, prostitution, a whole host of other things where they only count them if somebody gets arrested. And you think about it, you can't, nobody reports a drug sale. Nobody reports prostitution. It's like police have to be aggressive and actually catch those people. So those are Part 2 offenses. And you can look it up on FBI.gov. I have the link to the website in the course for those of you taking this course in your Canvas shell. And you can actually look at the description of each of these. And there's actually a video there on the more updated version of the UCR, which is called NIBRS, which gives a more detailed look at specific crimes at the individual level rather than a summary, which is what the UCR really is. So some of the criticisms, as I mentioned, not everybody reports crime. That gives us that dark figure. You only have a small number of crimes that you have data available. Sometimes you have attempts are combined with completed crimes, like an attempted burglary, if somebody doesn't get in, but they attempted it, might be listed as a burglary. There are other criticisms, and in your book, you're going to notice there's some other criticisms identified by the author. Again, we don't know about all the crimes. It's only a summary, so it doesn't give us details about when those crimes occurred, how those crimes occurred, because as I said, the new NIBRS system is going to give us that data. The other issue that they have is what they call the hierarchy rule. For the UCR counting crimes, they only count the most serious crime. So if you were watching TV and you saw one of those alarm company commercials that try to scare everybody into buying an alarm system, and you see the guy hide in the bushes, and you watch the woman in the fully, in her workout clothes, and she's in a glass room where anybody off the street can just watch what she's doing, and the implication is the guy's going to break into the house. Well, if a guy's breaking in the house with a woman alone, the suggestion there, at least the alarm company's suggestion, is there's going to be some type of assault, probably sexual assault, rape. There may be a theft that occurs. Maybe there's a murder. So you have potentially 4 or more crimes where you have a murder, you have a rape, you have a robbery. If the person's there and their property is being stolen from them, you have a robbery. You have a burglary because the person entered the property intending to commit those other crimes. You might have a theft because the property was taken. So you could have 5 potential crimes occur, but the UCR is only going to count the most serious one, which if the person is murdered, then it's going to be a murder. If it's a sexual assault and they're not murdered, it's going to be a sexual assault. So it depends. That's another thing. We don't know the total number of crimes that are committed because each incident, there's only going to be one crime that's going to be counted, and it's the most serious one in that particular incident. Where again, the NIBRS system is going to look at them all and is going to give you a whole lot of data. And this is what I'm talking about. The NIBRS system, National Incident-Based Reporting System, it was launched as part of the UCR in 1988. Believe it or not, it's not fully incorporated across the country. The FBI has a plan that in, I believe, 2020 or 2022, and again, there's a video on the FBI's website that it's going to be fully implemented. Unfortunately, still it's a voluntary system, so you still have some communities that don't report, but it's going to be collecting all kinds of data. So you're going to describe each offense, as well as describing the offender, relationship of the offender to the victim. I mean, there's a whole host of stuff. And when I was a police officer, we started doing this stuff, and it's monstrous to collect the data. It's very, very, very labor intensive to collect all this data. So it's really hard, which is why some police departments shied away from getting involved in it. But it really helps after you do that work on the back end to get us all that information so we can better figure out about crimes. And again, you don't have that hierarchy rule. And there's a third category called crimes against society that they imported into it. So it's good for us looking at crime and studying crime, very difficult for the police officer on the street having to complete those reports and document all the details that they want for it. Although, a lot of police reporting is now computerized. When I was doing it, we had laptops in our cars. So we would go through a crime report and we have to go through multiple pages and check off all these different things and associate. So it was all in the computer. If it was back when I started and everything was on paper, that really would have been a monstrous task. But the computers made it a lot simpler. The other major way that we count crimes in the United States is called the National Crime Victimization Survey, or NCVS. People identified the shortcomings of the UCR and said, hey, we're not knowledgeable of all the crimes. So they created this NCVS, which is a survey. It's a random survey. So they call 100,000 households or whatever per year, every year. The Census Bureau actually does it for the Bureau of Justice Statistics. So they call these people and they talk to people 12 and older, only in households, and ask them about various types of crime victimization. So it tends to grab some crimes that have not been reported to the police. And it is a way that victims can have a forum as to what's going on. And then, of course, just like any other survey or research, you take that sample, which would be a random sample of people from across the country, and then you extrapolate to determine what the effect is on the entire population. So the sample, whether it's 100,000 families or whatever it is, is a piece of the United States. And if they do a good job sampling, they can say, okay, this told us that 50% of the people in the survey report that they've been victims of crime, which suggests to us that 50% of the people in the country have been victims of crime, which also suggests to us that the number of crimes are a lot higher than what's reported to the police. So it's very interesting. All right, 4 objectives. They want to get detailed information about victims and consequences, estimate the number and types of crimes not reported, uniform measures of selective types of crime, and comparison over time. So they could look back and say, okay, in 1977, the survey told us this. In 2019, the survey told us this. There's been a decrease in crime, an increase in crime. This particular time, crime increased, this one decreased, which is, in the media, you hear a lot about that from reports of the UCR. And unfortunately, what a lot of people don't realize from seeing constant media reports of violent crimes is that crime, this may shock some of you, crime has actually decreased in this country over the last 30 to 40 years. If you go back and look at the data, and if you're reading anything about all the murders that people are talking about, the shootings in the city of Philadelphia, you go back, there's years it was way, way, way higher. So crime has actually decreased over the last 30, 40 years. All right, so that's the end of this particular lecture. You have a whole lot of resources available to you if you're taking this course in your Canvas course shell. There's a lot of things posted right there. And then in your Sage Vantage textbook and online resources access, you have other things. So you have your quizzes that you're going to take right there, chapter tests. But also I posted in the course links to flashcards, Sage Journal articles, video links, and of course you can use this URL to get information specifically regarding the textbook. All right, so reach out if you have any questions or comments, and have a wonderful evening. So I'm going to stop sharing this right now. Yeah, I did that. And the next lecture will be on chapter 4, which is about ethics in criminal justice. So everybody have a wonderful